Okay, just a couple of hours ago, a sniper banged at an ICE detention facility in Texas, and at least one is permanently gone, and two more were hit, and possibly two are gone. Now, these were all detainees. They were not ICE employees. They weren't federal government employees. And as we know, there's been this really aggressive push with ICE and to pick people up. They've been hiring to arrest as many people as they want. Well, I don't know if arrest is the term. Taking into custody as many people as Trump wants them to. Which, listen, I don't theoretically have a problem with them enforcing that there's all these illegal immigrants. That is the law, so just for the record. But anyways, so like here in California, the state of California just passed a law that ICE can't hide their faces. And ICE said they're not going to honor it. So the idea that law enforcement would be hiding their faces, that's pretty scary. Trump seems to be trying to create his own, and I don't like using the Nazi imagery, because that was 100 years ago. That was a different time and a different place. But just for frame of reference, I mean, he does seem to be, if he can grow ICE with a whole bunch of brand new, not necessarily super well trained people that can hide their face and are kind of personally loyal to him for giving him a job. I mean, he's created like his own brown shirts, his own kind of personal military force. Has that happened yet? I'm not saying it has, but here we go with and I don't like, you don't hear me using these conspiracy theory terms usually, but false flag. So 3 people hit at the facility, 1 or 2 gone. They're all detainees, I guess Hispanic. There's no law enforcement hit. But immediately the FBI, they found ammunition that conveniently, written on ammunition is the word anti-ICE. If you notice also in the Tyler Robinson, Charlie Kirk, there was stuff written on ammunition. This is since Kash Patel has become head of the FBI, people seem to like to start writing stuff on ammunition. Convenient piece of evidence. Anti-ICE. Well, if he was anti-ICE, why didn't he try to hit an employee of ICE? Why did he shoot into a van that presumably would be full of detainees? So, I'm going to tell you a very disturbing story that has nothing per se to do with this, but if you think that law enforcement does not stage things, and that's not a common practice, one of the eye-opening, disturbing conversations I ever had. I need to finish up. I need to do a story on this because I got all the legal documents. The guy gave it to me. I was talking to a lawyer, black lawyer in Detroit, who had formerly been a police officer, and he worked in internal affairs, and then he left internal affairs to be a to be a lawyer. And he was involved in suing successfully. He got 3 different families, like multi-million-dollar judgments against this one officer, Eugene Brown, a black officer in Detroit, who in the space of a couple of years, he eliminated like 3 people and not like 7 himself. And the police were clearing him, right, because he was staying on the job, but he was losing in the civil courts. And you would think, well, why wouldn't they fire him? But the way police union contracts are strong, if the police board clears the shooting, they can't be fired, even if a civil jury awards millions of dollars. So this guy had been hit with 3 judgments, but to the point of planting evidence. So I'm talking to this guy, to the lawyer, and Well, first, in this one particular case he's telling me about, the decedent, the guy that was killed, had powder burns on his chest. So he was shot once in the back as if he was running, and then he was turned over, and the firearm was placed on his chest. He was executed. The police board cleared him, and this lawyer, he was like, yeah, well, they had the throwaways, and it rolled off his tongue like no big deal, and I was like, throwaways? Like that? He said, oh yeah. Now, I don't know, does this go on now, but this was the 90s when this was happening, that the Detroit police, very commonly, all the squad cars would keep a pistol in case they ended up shooting somebody. They could place it at the scene. And this is a guy who had been internal affairs for the police. He wasn't just a lawyer saying crazy stuff to me. He said that's standard practice. So at this ICE shooting, to have bullets that conveniently say anti-ICE. Wow. And of course the gunman turned the gun on himself. Now, what people do, I don't think there's a lot of, I think there's a lot less conspiracies about a lot of public events, but what the behind the scenes puppet masters do is they take advantage of things that happen. So this guy was a crazy guy, and who knows who he wanted to hit. He may have wanted to hit immigrants. We don't know. But you take it as an opportunity to always be ratcheting up the idea that it's the left, whatever that even, that's such a vague term. And you don't hear me talking a lot about the right and left stuff. I think there's crazy people do crazy things in public, and they may ascribe it to whatever, but they're just crazy people. There was another shooting at an ICE facility recently, but I need to look into, I don't have my laptop, lost my laptop charger. I wanted to do more of a full story, but I did want to get this up for you. But I want to look into how many new agents has ICE processed in, how many new facilities has opened, and what's the update on them having law enforcement in masks as standard practice. Not, I understand that maybe a SWAT team or something, you don't want certain, people, but for just to have ICE rolling around with ski masks on and not having to identify themselves and just snatching people off the street, and by definition, whenever you grow a law enforcement, any job, they need to hire a bunch of people. When you hire people without training, of course, you're going to have problems. Law enforcement during the big crime boom of the late 80s and early 90s, for example, Washington, D.C. and New Orleans, which were the two cities that got the absolute highest violent crime rates of that era. They surpassed everywhere else. They also had the two most messed up police departments because they both did crazy hiring where both of these had all the police departments always had corruption scandals, but D.C. and New Orleans they each, I mean, it wasn't funny, but it would be so ridiculous. They were hiring, people that had armed robbery convictions, and they didn't bother to look into it. So what do they do as police officers? They do more armed robberies. There were hitmen police officers, just run-of-the-mill stick-up kids becoming cops in D.C. and New Orleans, and that contributed to the crime. Having incompetent, out-of-control police will grow your crime rate faster than a new drug, baby. So, what do you guys think? Do you think this bullet with anti-ICE written on it is a little too convenient? And then let's tie this into the events of 2 days ago, Charlie Kirk's funeral. Again, I don't like throwing the Nazi term around. My very first field of interest as a child, and one of my great fields of expertise to this very day in history is the Nazis. I know a tremendous amount about Nazi Party, Nazi Germany, the military campaigns of World War II. In fact, I think it's such an important, I always said in a college and a university, like there's certain required classes, taking every undergraduate should have to take a class about the history of Germany and the Nazis in the 30s and 40s, in the 30s really. I mean, we all know about World War II, to understand how a regular country, Germany was the second biggest economy in the world. Was it a bigger economy than England back then already? And in many ways, it was scientifically a little bit ahead of the U.S. A lot of like TV was invented there. A lot of our petrochemical stuff, our lovely heroin and methamphetamine, both first well synthesized there. Funeral. Stephen Miller, who's what is he the spokesman for? Well, he's connected with the government, and he gave a fiery speech where they've lined it up with there was a Nazi named Horst Wessel. Or he was a brown shirt. He was killed early, maybe in the early 30s, when there was still before the Nazis had gained power, and the Nazis did a Joseph Goebbels, the minister of disinformation for the Nazis, the propaganda minister, used Horst Wessel's death to galvanize and say a storm is coming. Well, this Stephen Miller used this storm words, which are, and also one of the first big white supremacist websites, Stormfront. The word storm is associated stormtrooper. It's like one of those dog whistle actual white supremacist words, and show you how good Stormfront was at getting information out kind of in a slick way. Back in about 04 or something, when I was a graduate student, I worked for the PhD over me was a criminologist, so we would process different data and do analysis of different things. And we were going to be giving a talk in front of our colleagues about abandoned properties in Detroit and associated with crime. So this is early on, like we ended up doing original research on that. But we were just looking up stuff on the internet. This is like 03, 04. And my father, he was employed for the city of Detroit in the urban planning. We liked reading about demography and buildings and stuff in Detroit. So all three of us independently, luckily, my father didn't scroll that far, me and the professor, we were getting these stats from this article we found on something called stormfront.org. Well, we didn't know what it was. And it was written perfectly well, like it was written academic, and population trends in Detroit and the change in racial and blah, blah, blah. But if you scrolled down and read long enough, it basically started, and that's how N-words ruined Detroit. And then you're like, oh my God, what website am I? But we almost used that as a source material. So Stormfront, I know this guy was using Storm, it was used all the time in Nazi stuff, and it is associated with white supremacist stuff. Now, go watch Stephen Miller's, I wish I can't cut any of this in, I don't have a damn computer on me, but Stephen Miller's speech on Charlie Kirk, it's very, I would go so far as to say it's Nazi-esque, it's channeling a Nazi rally. And then here we have this ICE shooting 2 days later, where we really don't know what happened. It's immigrants who were hit, but yet there's a bullet that has the phrase anti-ICE. So when someone comes to get me, they're going to write on the bullets, I hate Al Prophet. I mean, it's just too convenient, right? I mean, isn't that pretty strange? Same thing with the Taylor Robinson. He had these so-called Antifa writings on the bullets. And then, I don't know if you've been keeping up with Taylor Robertson, that's the guy who hit Charlie Kirk. His furry transitioning roommate, supposedly he was texting it right after. And the text messages, somebody fed it into ChatGPT and said, is this real or fake? And ChatGPT said it's fake. Now, that doesn't mean they're fake, but they sure don't sound legitimate. They're very, it's like dialogue from CSI. It's like we need some evidence, and someone who wasn't clever enough to make it seem even a little ambiguous wrote these things up. Listen, in post-war Italy, the 1960s, there was CIA helped the Italian government something called the strategy of tension, where to keep the Italian public from, they were voting for communists in democratic elections, and of course the business owners didn't like that. And the strategy of tension was they were blowing up trains, they were sniping people, and they were leaving evidence, false flag evidence, that it was left-wingers who did it, communists, so as to turn public sentiment against them. This is a big, I'm not officially accusing the administration of that, but this is getting pretty weird. And I do know for absolute certainty, because there is lots of Russian bot farms and other Eastern European bot farms that launch, they'll fill up the comments on these well-produced, like a lot of money was put into them, these shorts that'll be on YouTube or TikTok. They're so well done, it's like they're from a scene from a movie, but they're not. And they're all these like designed, they're racial. Like it'll be one I saw this is what boggled my, and I was like, who made this? Because as a director, I know when I was like, this cost many thousands of dollars to make. They had cop cars in the street, they had good actors, great camera angle, this might have cost $25,000 to make. It's a black guy walking on the street, two cops are driving past for no reason. They start to harass him. The guy's mother runs out. They pull a gun on his black mother. It's very, it would get you riled up emotionally, but it wasn't a part of a movie. It wasn't real. It wasn't like, this has been an announcement from the ACLU, keep an eye on your local police or something. It didn't say who made it. Who's making this stuff? So there is for sure people making chaos. I don't think there's a particular agenda. It would be too difficult just to necessarily make it be right, left, or a racial thing. You just get the low end of the American population riled up and angry, which they are, and it weakens the country. So this is happening, and is this ICE incident with bullets to say anti-ICE, is this part of an American strategy of tension? I want you to think about it. I want your homework is to go watch Stephen Miller's Charlie Kirk eulogy, and then watch read the Horst Wessel, Wessell eulogy, Our Prophet America. Dope.